So Dad, what is muscle memory? I'm Joseph. This is Input English. Today I have a story. Stories are a very effective way of implementing comprehensible input. We humans learn languages if we can understand messages in that language. We will absorb the language. We will be able to make it ours. This is comprehensible input. You don't have to understand every word. You need to be able to follow the story. Today we're going to rejoin our favorite cast of characters. Robert and Kathy are the parents. Craig and Bobby are the two young boys. We're going to join them at the breakfast table. It's during the summer, so the boys don't go to school, but they're still quite busy. On this day, breakfast began just before 8 o'clock in the morning. Kathy, the mom, is a practicing attorney, and she is getting ready for a court appearance coming up at 9 o'clock. She feels that she is very ready for this, but she still wants to be there on time. Robert is the manager of a hardware store, and he has a lot of work to do at the store. Bobby is attending art camp. Robert, his dad, will drop him at art camp on the way to work. That only leaves Craig, who is now 12 years old. He will be left to his own devices. That is, he will be able to come and go as he pleases. This is because he's now 12 years old, he is very trustworthy, and his parents gave him a key to the house. As breakfast started, there wasn't much talk because everybody was eating, and the boys certainly know that it's bad manners to eat with food in your mouth. After a while, Craig paused his eating and posed a question to his father. He said, "So Dad, what is muscle memory?" Robert understood the question, but he wanted to know the context. He wanted to know more about why he was being asked that question. Muscle memory related to what? In this family, the two young boys are learning from their parents, and they are trying to develop into good citizens. However, both parents are trying to be good parents, and they find that they learn something every day from the boys. Over the years, Robert has learned that when he is asked a question like this one, it makes sense to try to understand better where the question is coming from. What's the point of this question? So, to this end, Robert said, "Why do you ask?" Craig went on to explain that this all came from his last saxophone lesson. His teacher was suggesting that he practice more and that he work on muscle memory. Craig explained that at the time he wasn't really sure what this muscle memory was, and it appeared to him that the teacher thought he understood. He led on during the lesson like he did understand, but in reality he didn't understand. He explained all that to his dad. With that information, Robert started into his explanation. He asked one more question of Craig. He asked, was he talking about scales and etudes? To this question, Craig said, yes, he was. How did you know? He went on to explain that muscle memory is a casual expression, not a scientific term. It describes what happens when someone practices a particular skill or activity so much that the skill becomes automatic and more predictable. Muscle memory was described in athletic endeavors such as a golf swing or batting practice. But now the term is used in other activities, specifically in music. Really, any time someone is doing an activity that can be practiced deliberately, and if that practice results in improved performance, then you could say that you have developed muscle memory. At this point, Craig nodded. He now understands better, but he still has some questions. Robert continued. He said, you know, a few years ago, I read a great book on this subject. It was called Peak. It was written by a researcher, a psychologist, who looked at how people improve their skills. The author actually studied musicians. He pointed out that the evidence showed that deliberate practice is a very good way to improve a skill. And then Robert stopped himself. He said, you know, I read that book a few years ago and I really enjoyed it, but I don't really recommend that you read it at this stage in your life. I don't think you'll find it very interesting. I think it would be a long run for a short slide. Now that expression is an interesting one. A long run for a short slide talks about a lot of effort and a little benefit. It's a metaphor that came out of baseball. Sometimes when a baseball player is trying to get safely onto a base, they will slide the last few feet to make their profile very low and make it hard for the baseman to tag them out. It's part of the game of baseball. It's a strategy. If you slide into a base, you might be safe. The metaphor, a long run for a short slide, simply means a lot of effort with very little benefit. Again, Craig nodded. He seemed to understand what was being said. He asked, so how do I develop muscle memory? How does it work? How do the muscles remember anything? Robert realized that he had not made himself very clear on this point. He said, well, the muscles don't really remember anything per se. Any memory that we have is in our brain. But it wouldn't make any sense to say brain memory because that's redundant. That's where all our memories are. When someone says muscle memory, what they mean is memory about how the muscles are working, how they're coordinating, how they're moving. The memory is in your brain. The human mind is really quite amazing when it comes to the development of skills. When we start a new skill, we're not very good at it. And as we practice, we get better and better. As our skills get better, it becomes automatic. It becomes second nature. We don't have to think about it anymore. When you ride your bicycle, you don't think about how to turn the handlebars or how to crank the pedals. You don't think about that because it happens automatically. Craig now nodded with great understanding. He has had that feeling that riding the bicycle is automatic. Robert said this business of riding a bicycle is such a great example that we have a saying that we use if we know something well enough that even if we haven't done it for years, we still can do it. We say that it's like riding a bicycle. It is said that once you learn to ride a bicycle, you never forget how to do it. Craig nodded. He understood that. Robert said, well, basically, that ability to ride the bicycle automatically, without thinking about it, is muscle memory. But bear in mind, the actual place that memory occurs is in the brain. Craig asked a follow-up question. He asked, if I practice a particular scale the way the teacher told me, up and down 2 octaves, and I do it dozens or hundreds of times, will it become automatic? Robert said, yes, it will. You will develop muscle memory. He continued by pointing out that we have to be a little careful about how we practice, because if we practice something wrong, that will also become automatic too. Craig said, oh, I get it, because the teacher wanted me to practice my scales with a metronome. He wanted them to be very even. He told me to change the speed on the metronome so that I could play them faster and faster, but he wanted them to be in time with the metronome. Robert said, bingo, your teacher is trying to help you develop muscle memory that is good for your future. You'll develop a skill that you'll find useful. Craig said, I get it. Thanks, Dad. That really helps. During this discussion, Kathy was diligently eating her breakfast. What she had on her mind is her court appearance. She needed to finish breakfast and then get off to the office on her way to the courthouse. When she finished her breakfast, she excused herself from the table and rinsed her plate off in the sink. She placed it in the dishwasher. The rest of the family finished up their breakfasts, and each of them took their plate and silverware to the sink to be rinsed off and placed in the dishwasher. Even Bobby did that with his plate. Bobby was actually very happy that he could do that, because in the past he wasn't tall enough to rinse his plate off and put it in the dishwasher. He just put it on the kitchen counter, and one of the parents would rinse it off and load the dishwasher. But now Bobby is getting tall enough that he can actually rinse his own plate and put it in the dishwasher. Shortly, Robert and Bobby went off to drop Bobby at art camp, and then Robert would be off to work. About the same time, Kathy departed for the office, and that left Craig at home to his own devices. When everyone had departed, he went upstairs and got his saxophone, as well as his music stand and music. He brought all of that down and set it up in the living room. Since no one would be home, he figured he could spread out in the living room and have a very comfortable practice session. Unfortunately, as he was getting ready to start practicing, he realized that he had left his metronome up in his room. So he had to make another trip upstairs to retrieve the metronome. Now he was ready. He had his music on the music stand, his horn was assembled, the reed was just right. He had the metronome set very slowly so that he could work on very even scales, with the idea of increasing the speed throughout the day. He had a plan. He's working on muscle memory. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.